Hello everyone. In this video we're gonna review some basic commands for creating figures with MATLAB. Export figures to EPS format and subsequently edit the exported figures using Adobe Illustrator. First, let me describe the script that we're gonna be using, which is currently on screen. I provide some comments in green for the clarity of the code, as you can see. The first set of commands are issued to clear any previously generated information from a previous script, to clear the command window, clear memory, and close any remaining open figures. Then we will define two functions. Here I call them f and g, corresponding to a data series 1 and 2, which are, in reality, will be our result from our analysis. Here I just define some polynomial functions and some trigonometric functions for illustrative purposes. Then we need to define a set of values for the variable x, which is our independent variable. Here I define it from 0 to pi with steps of 100 of pi. With these values defined, we can proceed to create a figure by issuing the figure command. Then we can generate a plot of f of x against x using blue solid lines issuing the following command. Then we need to use the hold on command to make sure any subsequent plotting command overlaps its output in the same figure as the previous case. Then we can plot g of x against x using green solid lines. And with these commands, we can generate a basic plot using MATLAB, as you can see here. But you will notice that this figure lacks important information regarding the meaning of the data. It only shows two curves without clear identification. To provide further details about the data, we can issue the legend command, as you can see here, which identifies each curve based on the provided labels following the order of generation of the plots. Then we can add some extra information like a title for the plot, labels for the x and y axles, and also we can define the limits of these axles, making sure that both data series are correctly represented within the area of the figure. If we run the full script, we get the following result, which ultimately is a richer representation of our data series. MATLAB allows us to add other elements to our plot, but maybe we want to go beyond its capabilities to clarify some additional features of the data, or to further facilitate the readability of the information. To do so, we will use a second tool called Adobe Illustrator. To take a figure from MATLAB to Illustrator, we will export it as an EPS file. To do this, we will go to our Figure tab and hit File, Export Setup, Rendering, tick the Custom Render option, and hit Export. Here, it will prompt us with a new window where we need to give the file a name, for example, sample figure, and select a file format. Here we'll select EPS. We hit save, and we will have our figure saved. And we should be ready to read the file in Illustrator. Once we open Adobe Illustrator, we will go to the File menu and click on Open. There, we will search for our previously saved EPS file and click Open. The first time we open the EPS file in Illustrator after exporting it from MATLAB, it might take a couple of seconds to open. Afterwards, it shouldn't take that long. We'll be prompted with the following color conversion tab. We can hit on OK, and then it will give us a warning message saying that there are some missing fonts on our file. We can go and hit Replace Fonts, and here, for example, we can choose Times New Romans, Replace All, and hit Done. Here we will have our figure now in the Illustrator environment. From here we can hit File, Save. We can choose to save on our computer and search for a location and a name for the file. We'll save it as an EPS file, and we'll call it example figure initial to give it a different name than the MATLAB file. We save our document, we hit OK, and we can start editing our file. The first thing we will notice is that the elements are grouped. To undo this grouping, we can just click anywhere in the figure and hit ungroup. Then we'll notice that there are some white backgrounds coming from MATLAB. These ones we can just remove them. The first thing we will do is we're gonna group the data results, the curves, to the frame. Because as you will notice, you can actually move the curves around, but this would take away the physical meaning of our data. So first, we're going to select the whole data set as such, and then we'll hit group. By doing so now, if we move the curves, we can move the whole structure. But if we want to edit the curves, we can always double click on the group, and that will allow us to actually modify any elements within the group. So one thing that we'll do is we'll check that the curves are in the front while the frame is on the back. To adjust this, we'll select the curves, right click anywhere, arrange, send to back, and now the frame should be on the front. Then we're going to modify the legend of the plot. By default, MATLAB exports the legend as a frame and a square. We can remove those elements, and then we can move the legend to a better position. We'll change the size of the legend font from the menu to the right. Here we can make it 10 points, change its position, and move the lines accordingly. We can also change the thickness of the lines. By default it takes 0.5. Let's define it as 1.5. And we can do the same for the curves. As we're here, we can also modify the thickness of the frame. For example, we can send it to 1 point to improve its appearance. We can move back and now focus on the ticks for the X and Y axles. Here we can actually change their size to 15 points to improve readability. We will notice that some of them may not be exported from MATLAB as a single character. This is not really a big issue. We can just copy one of the previously defined text elements and add the missing values. Then we can align the elements in the ticks as such to make sure they are all in the straight line. We can also make sure that they are aligned within the horizontal distance. And then we can proceed to do a similar step with the y-axis ticks. We can change their size to 12, reposition them accordingly. We select all of them, align them to the right. Then we can change the size of the axle labels to 17 points and reposition them accordingly. As you may notice, not all the text elements coming from MATLAB are completely black, so we can recolor these elements by selecting the text that we want to modify. Go to the fill option and select the color black. We can increase the size of the title to 20 points and reposition it accordingly. And something that we may want to do is to showcase our data in a different aspect ratio. For example, for some data representations, we may want to have a more horizontal or vertical way of showing the data. To do this, we can directly take our group curves, hit Ctrl C, which will copy the group, and hit Ctrl V. Here it will ask us to merge swatches. We'll hit OK, and we'll have a copy of our block. Here we can position it to the right, for example, and we can play with the aspect ratio of the curve. As you may imagine, if we have too many ticks on the horizontal axis and we compress the figure in a more vertical display, we may want to remove some of the exceeding ticks. To do so, we just enter our group. We double click again to enter the group corresponding to the axles, and we can remove the intermediate ticks as desired. Then we can copy the elements from the previous plot corresponding to the labels missing on the second plot and arrange them in their corresponding positions. We can go and check the alignment, and then we can also copy the labels for the axles. Here we can move it a little bit more to the right, copy the y-axis labels, and copy the title for the figure, and also the legend. We can reposition our plot closer to the previous one. And then we'll have an enhanced version of our original plot coming from MATLAB. It is important to highlight that within Adobe Illustrator, we'll have a series of shortcuts that are very useful. One of them is the letter V, which will automatically select the selection tool, which allows us to touch any item and move it around by dragging. Also, we'll have the T shortcut that allows us to write text. If at some point we want to stop a command, we can always hit escape, and if we want to remove an element, we can directly hit delete. And we can save our progress with Ctrl S. Then, once we finish editing our figure, we can go to File, Export, Export As, and this will prompt us with another window where we can put the file name and select the format that we want to use to export the file. Here we will use PNG for the example. We'll hit Export. We can leave the default options here and hit OK. With this, we'll have a PNG version of our plot with all the editing done in Illustrator included, and this will be the end for the first demo regarding how to use MATLAB and Adobe Illustrator to create enhanced visuals for scientific and engineering publications.